en dat soort fratsen. Dus ja.
Fantastisch. Houd u scherp.
Ja, man.
Alright, we hebben nog een tweetal minuutjes. Wacht even, nog een minuut al voordat de video start. Dus een goede 2 minuten voordat we live gaan. Heb je al veel kunnen volgen, Dennie?
Niet heel veel. Dat merk ik wel dat. In het begin was dat nog makkelijk, maar in het algemeen, hoe meer conferenties virtueel, die hoe positief bedoeld, maar toch als paddenstoelen uit de grond poppen, is soms heel moeilijk. En zeker in combinatie dat je eigenlijk een paar goede klanten hebt, ja, het zijn een paar mooie dingen zien, maar het is zeker niet meer zo vroeg. Ik moet zeggen, ik ga 24 uur wakker blijven en opblijven, maar en alles bekijken, nee, dat kan nu echt niet. Het is gewoon te veel. En ook al interesseert die, zo wel eerder eens nadien bekijken. Zeker niet een slechte wel, maar ik denk dat dat bij velen zo is.
Ja, er is een overaanbod op het moment. Hè. Dus,
Je ziet dat ook, dat heel veel mensen niet live kijken, maar nadien op YouTube en zo nadien en dan de reactie nadien komen. Ja, dus het is vrij normaal waarschijnlijk wat dat kunnen zeggen.
Ja, klopt.
De pre-roll video is juist gestart. Dus houden jullie klaar.
Ja.
Ik ga eruit gaan en enkel jullie twee. Dus jullie gaan mij niet meer horen als ik eruit ga. Goed, succes Danny. Doe dat goed.
Ja. Dank u wel.
Wacht, nog even. Ik ga in de private chat aangeven wanneer dat je live bent, Chris.
We zaten nog even te wachten. Tegen autism.
Autism en tech.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our next session for this virtual Azure Community Day. I have with me here Dennie Declercq. He's also a Belgian MVP, great and awesome guy, and he works at DDSoft. So, Dennie, please introduce yourself a small bit to our audience, and good luck with the session.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Dennie. I have my own non-profit, DDSoft, and I have a talk for you today, not a typical Azure talk, but I'm going to talk about autism and tech. And why do you want to do this? Because diversity and inclusion is really important, and I should say it's even more important right now, but it was already always important. So, of course, there will be some links with Azure and coding in common, because that's my biggest interest, and it's autism and tech. It's not autism in a shopping mall. So there will be a lot of tech. So first of all, I'm really happy to be here, to have the opportunity to speak, even at virtual conferences, and that I can still deliver my, let's call it duty as an MVP, of course not a real duty, but inspiring the community about accessibility and autism. That's really important. If we say the whole situation was 20 years ago, there wouldn't be community anymore, or it would be very, very difficult. I can't imagine, so don't do this. So welcome to my talk. I can say bonjour and hello and hola, but for the rest, I stop it right here. Maybe also ciao, but then I stop it. So the content will be today, I find it always a very accessible approach to start showing the content, what you can expect. And as I teased already before, it will be a different session of the other beautiful sessions of this virtual day today. So I'm going to talk that I am different. I'm going to talk a bit about the autistic brain. And in the autistic brain, there are some theories, a lot of theories. And I'm going to focus myself on 4 theories: the executive functioning, the central coherence, and the theory of mind, and comorbid. And then I will explain a bit about his theories, and then I will to split that up into tech situations where those can be a problem or an issue or a workaround or just a situation. That's how you cope it. And I'm gonna end it telling a bit what worked for me during my journey in tech. So I'm Dennie Declercq, and I have my own non-profit DDSoft, where I am the president and developer and researcher and speaker. I am autistic, and I'm an accessibility and autism expert. The last years, I traveled around the world as a conference speaker. And all my work that I do it as a volunteer. I don't get paid for this. Because I didn't find my way on the paid job market. I am a Microsoft MVP since the summer of 2019, and I'm really proud of this recognition. I'm really happy with that. And I'm very active on Twitter with my Twitter handle @DennieDeclercq, but also with the hashtag Dreaming is Believing. And more about the hashtag Dreaming and Believing in the coming days, maybe weeks, but it's just teasing for the people who know me. But you should watch me in the coming days, weeks. And also important, I'm a positive thinker, and it's really important, even now. So let's talk a little bit more about myself, because first of all, I'm different, and second, this is a talk about autism and tech. So this will be the live demo, an explanation how life is of a person with autism. And as a child, I always was different. Things didn't go well. When I was 13, I got my autism diagnosis. I went to a school for autistic teenagers, and I had a big interest in IT. I wanted to be a programmer. Unfortunately, the school where I went to discouraged me and my parents to go to university college to study for a job as a software engineer. Why? Because the level of math at that school was way too low. And between 2008 and 11, I tried some jobs. But because I had no computer science degree, and also I have to admit I had problems with communication. And for these reasons, the only job that they offered for me was in a fabric for people with disabilities. I wasn't happy there. I was unhappy there. And afterwards, I was developing in Microsoft technologies for my hobby and free time. And the job, I had to do easy manual tasks. And for me, and that works for a lot of people with autism, but not for everyone, but if I do easy manual tasks, my brain takes me to the wrong places. My brain takes me to all the places, but especially not where I want to be and need to be, where it's good for me. I became mentally ill, and I got to go on a sickness benefit for a long period of time. But beside my autism, I am a big tech lover, a big technology lover. I am very passionate, and I follow the tech scene for a pretty long time. From the beginning of my tech interest, I was always very fanatic pro Microsoft. I used Windows Mobile on PDAs. I was the only one in my surroundings who had a PDA, and people said that I was crazy because they all had a normal cell phone, mobile phone. And I was one of the early adopters of Windows Phone. You can all imagine the pain that I have knowing that Windows Phone has died. So I installed each Windows version since Windows 98, and I worked with each operating system since Windows 3.1. Why I missed Windows 1.0? My thoughts on Windows 8? I love the introduction of apps. I saw people around me, to be sure, not tech people. I didn't have a lot of tech people around me, having a big struggle with Windows 8. I didn't see why. After all, I love Windows 10. I call it the ease of use of Windows 7 with the possibilities of apps that were introduced in Windows 8. And at this time, Windows 10 is even easier and more accessible for most people than Windows 7. I never been a gamer. I always said, games are boring, because in the game world you live in is already created like the developers want it to be. I want to develop my own thoughts. I started coding in Visual Basic 6, I changed to VB.NET, and after this I saw the light. Let's say I saw C#. I love music. But if I have to go to choose between a music festival or a developers conference, I really know what to choose. And by the way, I made a big comparison between software conferences and music festivals. And if I said I know what to choose, I think in 2015, when I planned to live on my own, I really made the conscious choice to sell a ticket for a music festival in Belgium, Graspop, but buy or use my ticket for a local tech conference, Techorama, so I don't lie. So in this part, I would love to explain how the brain of people of a person with autism thinks. A person with ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, a person with Asperger's. In the world, there are a lot of definitions, and some people say autism is not the same as Asperger's. Some people say it's all a spectrum disorder. To be sure, there is a lot of similarity, and I don't want to go into politics, especially not in world politics, but I cover them all together. So, but what's proven is that the brain of those people works different than people without autism. And there were studies in the past that explains how the brain of people with autism works different than people without autism. I will explain 3 basic theories and 1 additional, with easy to understand examples. In this part, I will give intentionally only examples that nothing have to do with tech at all, but it's only 4 slides. In the following parts, the biggest part of my talk, I'm going to link those theories to a lot of tech cases. That's where you are here for. So, let me introduce you to the theory of mind. Theory of mind is all about seeing the why and understanding and knowing the logical steps that people without autism do automatically, or as a lot of developers say the joke, automatically. A lot of steps are very obvious for a lot of people, but not for people on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, you know. The unspoken rules for greeting people, seeing the direct link between cause and effect, that's not so clear. And of course, I want to give some examples. Entering your office and greeting humble, greeting less humble, or not greeting at all can make a huge difference into the behavior of your colleagues for the entire day. And excuse you, all of you, but in this talk, I'm going to link a few times to the COVID-19 crisis because it affects everyone, but also a lot of people with autism. But as I said, it affects everyone. So I'm going to link it here. Knowing why some COVID-19 rules are in place and in which place and all the details of it, and directly behaving as expected can be more difficult for people with autism, or is different. And different is in 2 ways. It can be more difficult to follow the rules, but it can also be that they are really too strict on some rules. I just say different. I don't say less or more. That's person per person. Executive functioning is everything that you need to execute for tasks in daily living or in a working environment. Examples are planning a time slot in your agenda, planning what you need from the grocery store, planning how you get with public transport or with your own place to the desired place. And for me, shopping was always difficult, and I told it already in a lot of talks that I presented in the past. Shopping is one of the most difficult things for me as a person with autism. It's easier to fly to the other side of the world than do good my groceries. Yeah, I'm strange. I'm a strange person. But COVID-19 really shopping just got worse, especially with the regulations and the rules in Belgium. Central coherence is a coherence of situations, persons, things, tasks, and works. Central coherence is about seeing the global picture. How is everything glued together? How are the situations linked to each other? And of course, I have also some examples. Why is a pedestrian clothed in a nursing suit? And all the persons know it automatically, but some people with autism can find it more difficult to know that the reason is the person, he or she, is going to care a patient at home. Why are typical meetings always in the evenings? And the explanation can be because the person has to work during the day, or even if the person with autism don't have to work too, or if you have meetings with people on the other side of the world. The last theory, the last official theory, is about context blindness. In short words, people with autism doesn't always understand the context of something. One incentive has one meaning for a person with autism, and for other people it can be different meanings. Examples are, in the normal world, why does my mom comes home sad? Maybe because he had a bad day at work, but people with autism can directly think, why? Did I do something wrong? Is my mom angry on me? And I had to talk about Peter Vermeulen. He is a famous researcher in autism, a Belgian one, and also a book writer and speaker about autism. And Peter invented the theory and the term about context blindness. A lot of people with autism have also comorbid diagnoses. And personally, I find comorbid a very cruel word. It does me think on dying. But to be sure, you don't die from autism. That's a good thing. But comorbid diagnosis means having other disorders next to your autism. This can be extra anxiety, ADHD, depressions, and extra problems with coping stress. So, what do I mean with extra anxiety and extra problems with coping stress? Let's explain. Most persons with autism has already a basic difficulty with coping stress and suffering from anxiety. With extra, I mean a very bad in coping stress or having an additional anxiety disorder next to the autism. So you survived the boring part of this talk. I hope it was not too boring, but I believe this theory was needed to understand the rest of my talk. Let's talk about that. Right now, I'm going to link the test scenarios to the main theories of autism. And we're going to start with executive functioning in tech. I say that a lot of people with autism can have different energy levels. And you have two types of different energy levels. The first type is people with autism that don't have a lot of energy in common or in global. For this group of people, it takes a lot of energy just to embrace all the incentives of normal daily life. The other group of people with autism is people that are in the beginning of something new. I say, in the beginning of each new experience, they are very energetic, but the interest loses very fast. And energy is going down pretty much as the interest is going down. And if I translate this to kind of energy levels in technology, for some people it's starting a new technology hard. And just learning the technology, experimenting with the technology, and maybe the necessary conferences, meetups, online learning, online research can be very hard. Then there are definitely a lot of people on the spectrum that have a huge interest in the beginning of something new. They watch each video, go to each conference and meetup, but when most people are gaining interest in that specific technology, they lose the interest really too fast and start something brand new. And of course, you also have the category where the people are getting very passionate, and this can be once in a lifetime or once for several years in their career. Most of the people with autism think straightforward. But what do I mean? If they think their way is the best way to code, the people believe that they are using the best classes or procedures. Sorry, that is the way it is. And maybe I'm not making myself popular if people on the spectrum are watching these talks, but most of the time, that is what it is. I say you have to call a cat. It's not a dog. I have problems with this too. If I code something together with my friend and team member at Edisoft, Kenny. I also have difficulties to change my way of coding. To be specific, each version of C#, there are new possibilities to code specific tasks. And that is really good for a better code style. And as I said, I attend a lot of conferences, of course, as a speaker. And I'm always excited in talks like, what's new in C# X, but it takes a very long time to implement the new code style. I admit, at this time I'm writing C# 5.0, but I still use some C# as in 3.1, 3.5, 2.0, but of course with the new compilers and the new the new code, but let's say on the old way. And if you link this to theory of autism, they say that people with autism have difficulties with change. It's something, and that's a typical thing that comes in many ways. So let's go deeper into code patterns that I touched in the previous slide. I have a lot of difficulties moving from one code pattern to another. Changing code patterns takes a lot of energy, too much. For me, it's way more difficult to switch focus. This is also the reason that I wait most of the time way too long to take the chance. But I am curious about new patterns. And at each conference, I attend a lot of talks about code patterns. And here you are two, for me, my code pattern heroes, Mark Seaman and Jimmy Bogart, both also MVP and very active in the Microsoft community. But for me, there is a mismatch between interest and capacity. And then finally, taking the switch to implement the new code style of pattern. The day structure of a person with autism can be different. I can completely understand that people with autism prefer to take a day off at work if they want to work on something for their work during the night, or if they want to see an online live stream of a conference. People with autism can also have benefit with more breaks during the day. Planning a project timeframe for delivery can also be harder. A lack of planning can occur, and how to distribute capacity can be hard. In this part, I'm going to show you some scenarios in tech, and also I talk about conference life, where central coherence is the reason that people with autism experience differences. The fact that conferences are going virtual, as I said, is difficult for everybody. Definitely not only for people with autism. And I have to admit, it even has some advantages. For example, you can attend way more conferences that you can go to in person. But I am sure it takes more time for someone on the spectrum to adapt to the new normal. There's also a context switch. In normal conferences, you walk, you talk to people, and the structure and the breaks and food is really set. People are going to talk to you, and you find easy distractions thanks to the travel life. In virtual conferences, you definitely need more attitude for yourself. The context which really isn't clear. Some examples. Not everyone can take vacation from home for the conference. For some people I know, it's more obvious to take vacation for a conference in real life than for a virtual conference. Some conferences, virtual conferences, are in other time zones, and that's really difficult. And some people still have family life. And it can be difficult to combine with virtual online streams of conferences. Seeing and experiencing the coherence of multiple software solutions from different vendors can be challenging, or is challenging for me, although. The context switch of each software system is challenging for some people. This can be a reason to use only products from one stack, from one software vendor. I see that most developers that I know use various technologies and combine different technology solutions, different software solutions, and their technology stack. For me, this is difficult, and I'm way more rigid in this. And I know sometimes you have to do. But first of all, I wait most of the time way too long, or even a lot of times I let the ID go. There are reasons that you need to do this. By example, if you want a mind map, and Microsoft don't have a solution for this. Can I say yet? I don't know. Other examples can be pricing scenarios. And even in the scope of the same vendor, let's talk here about Microsoft, there are different software paradigms. By example, Microsoft Dynamics is not the same as Visual Studio of Office. So the first question can be, why do you talk about code patterns in executive functioning, but about code patterns in the part of central coherence? And of course, the answer is really easy to explain. I link the stuff in coding itself in the part of the execution of the brain. But the complete code patterns and architecture is way broader than that. The problem with cohesions comes a lot more into place. Seeing how all these nice things together are linked to each other is not always easy. And of course, Azure is a nice cloud. I love Azure. But there are a lot of services. And in fact, there is no one software solution that you can make, so end product I mean, but only one way. So with only one way of choosing the services. Each end desired solution, so end user and desired solution, is achievable with different patterns. And each pattern is completely separated from each other. And there are coming a lot of new methods, or how do you call it, products into the Azure stack on a very frequent basis. It can be difficult to follow up what's always the best choice. But I like to experiment with those, of course. I see a lot of people on the spectrum using another way of coloring. Some prefer the dark theme. Others prefer the white theme, the bright theme. I know people on the spectrum where they have a real physical headache if the screen is too bright. For me, myself, I always link the use of the software program to the color scheme of the software that I used first. For me, it feels more real. I also have the feeling, and sometimes you can have a feeling, as you know that's a wrong feeling, but you still have it. It's possible in autism, that the first standard color scheme is the color scheme that the developer teams really want you to use. And I said, and I want to say it again, it's a wrong consumption, but that's my way, different way of seeing and feeling coherence. Let's talk about conferences. So this was not the last, but one of the last conferences in real life this year. It was, yeah. And I have also the feeling that people on the spectrum experience conferences different. For me, it was really important to attend a lot of conferences, meetups, as a speaker, or even between those that I want to speak. I couldn't say stop. And I also have a wish list of speakers. And if I combine that to the persons around me who don't have autism, they more focus on the topics and not especially on the speakers, on a wish list of speakers I have. And for me, it's also, and of course for a lot of people with autism and for everyone, it's important to belong with somebody. And in conferences, I really belong. So let's talk about theory of mind in tech scenarios. If you are too fanatic, it can be difficult to have conversations with people with different meanings, with people with different visions. And of course, this can be a struggle at a user group or at a conference. And maybe it's a bit more easier in a user group because the evenings at the user group are mostly categorized. We also have different user groups for different technologies. Different communication can be talking too much or too little. But this is just an example. Different communication is also about having difficulties with eye contact and non-verbal communication. People can be pretty excited about a session at a user group or at a conference, but have difficulties to share the appreciations to the speaker. And now I want to be positive again. I said a positive thinker. And now I see that COVID-19, the virtual meetings, is real more easy. I don't have the problem with eye contact anymore. Oh, that's a good thing. So virtual conferences and even virtual meetings, by not only conferences, but the meetings that I have with customers at my nonprofit, no, the eye contact isn't a thing anymore. Okay, positive thinking, a good thing. Let's talk about being fanatic in tech. Some people are very pro Microsoft, a big fanatic pro Microsoft fan. Some are a big fanatic Apple fan. And some are really into open source, but in the way that they only use Linux also. Then I don't only say coding on GitHub. And if I have observed the world of people with autism, Asperger's, they are most of the time more fanatic than people without. Or they only use a Mac, or they only use a Windows device. Microsoft is all good, or Apple is all good. But it's not only about OSs, it's also about coding styles. By example, it's about being pro JavaScript or C# or what else. I see in my surroundings more people without autism taking the best of both worlds, using a front end in Angular, a JavaScript framework, with the backend in C#. And for me, I'm pretty fanatic for the Microsoft implementation. And I never had a good PWH approach. I made my backends in .NET, and I just did simple HTML, and I waited until Blazor. And now in Blazor, I really can have the advantage of good front ends. That will be more difficult for me without Blazor. And forums are difficult if you are fanatic, if you have a specific limited topic of interest. When I started my tech career, I had the feeling that the people at some forums accepted a lot of do-it-yourself knowledge and put a lot of online search on before. Maybe it's due to my autism, but years ago, if I was in the beginning of my journey into tech, I had the feeling that people didn't take me serious. If you chat via direct message, and it's also called for Messenger on Facebook platform, it's also direct message, not only on Twitter, there's a big mismatch in seeing the context of the person at the other side. So context blindness comes to play. And sometimes it can be very difficult in discussions. and this can cause very embarrassing scenarios. You can understand that having problems with adapting new code patterns in combination in being straightforward in code style, then it can be difficult if people comment on your code style during a code review. And of course, if you combine this with communication difficulties, yeah, you know what I mean, folks? I guess you do. So this is the last part of autistic thinking in combination with technology. I'm going to tell about a specific case of comorbid difficulties. I'm going to focus today on anxiety. And why I'm going to focus on anxiety? Because this is my biggest comorbid difficulty, or my only comorbid difficulty. I have next to my autism and anxiety disorder. So let's talk a bit about it. You can have difficulties with anxiety and tech, afraid to change from tool stack, being afraid to shut a product or a process down before starting a new one, being afraid for the latest update of your Windows because last time your system crashed. But that was not Microsoft's fault, Jude. You installed the Insider Alpha version, of course, on the production device. Being afraid to be rejected in a forum online, and being afraid to ask critical questions. Being afraid to admit there's something that you need help with. Because if you don't know anything, you are not an expert. You are not a real programmer anyway. Of course, it's a joke. But some people can feel that way. Of course, it's a joke. And being afraid of public traffic or traffic can result in going to less conferences and meetup. So having a little more space to learn. Being fanatic in combination with anxiety problems, of course. But about being fanatic about some technology and being afraid and being in trouble to lose friends in your network because they have another vision. What about being against something, but being afraid to lose job offers or losing a sale of a product from a customer because you are afraid to offend people? And most of you know this. I have a talk that I delivered at some conferences about Azure, an Azure talk. It's about going from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service. And I'm really, at least some of you know, remember this talk. I made the switch for a product that we delivered in the past with DSoft, but honestly, it took way too many years before I did the switch. I was at a certain point building an Android application in Xamarin Forms, and I updated the NuGet to the latest version of Xamarin.Forms, and my app didn't launch again. Petty crap. I downgraded the NuGet, and the app was running again. Hooray! To be clear, it took a very long time before I tried another NuGet package again. But as I said, I am fanatic pro Xamarin for Android apps, so I wanted the latest features. Luckily enough, at some point I learned to update the NuGet packages that was possible in different Git branches. So I did it with Git branches. I experimented with the Xamarin updates. In this part, I want to tell you, it's the last part of this talk, I want to tell you what worked for me, what I have baked into my schedule and routine and attitude to adapt to a more modern style of developing and coding. Let's say more than everybody else did. First of all, I have a big interest in technology and Microsoft languages. I love to be inspired from community leaders. This can be on conference talks, blogs, and even some really nice vlogs. If I want to dig deeper into some topics, I really love the way of free accessible learning, as I call it, in Microsoft Learn. I can say that Microsoft Learn really helps me in coding patterns. It's a really easy style to do. For me, it's more easy than watching too many videos. Let's talk about colors. And here the answer is pretty simple. Do you see Captain Jack on the slide with the Xamarin Expert Day? Yeah, the urge, as I said. Most of the time, I don't love dark color schemes. But sometimes really my eyes say me to do. I have also an eye disease and wear contact lenses. So if I only have the choice between not computing anymore or switching to the dark theme, simple it is. New technologies. For me, it's really important to focus on the interest, the love of the conferences, and the joy of being inspired. And then, if I watch some talks, then it really helps that I dig deeper into that with Microsoft Learn. So let's talk about Windows and Mac. And here is also the need and the urge, very important reasons. Maybe, unfortunately, I don't know. I have a Windows machine and I also have a Mac. And my Windows machine had to go 2 times in quite a short time span to the PC technician for an SSD drive update. So a bigger SSD, hooray! And in the past, I didn't use my Mac, really not a lot. Of course, only I use a machine to connect to it, from my Windows machine, of course, if I want to deploy some Xamarin apps. Oh, wait, no, it's called Maui. So, but if you, then maybe I don't make a dirty joke, but it's really easy thanks to Microsoft Edge. And if you combine Microsoft Edge and most of the products that Microsoft has, like Office and the whole the Azure thing and Microsoft Teams, it's all the same nearly the same on Windows and on Mac. And even right now we have Visual Studio for Mac, we have Visual Studio Code, and they're really exactly the same, or let's say nearly exactly the same. So I can work on my Mac device with all the Microsoft technologies that I love. That's really make it more easy. So I'm afraid we have to start wrapping up this talk. So I said that I was different, that I am autistic, or that I have autism. And I gave you some basic theory about autism. Then I talked about four theories, and then I linked them to technology. I linked all the technologies that I talked about to the 4 theories of autism to try to explain how this works. And then I added some extra information about what's helped for me. So I want to thank you a lot for attending or watching my talk, if it's right now, in real life, or afterwards. You can also always follow me on Twitter with my Twitter handle @Declercq. And as I said, dreaming is believing. You really have to follow this. More info to come very, very soon. You also can send me a mail. I want to thank my sponsors and thank you. Are there some questions?
Thanks, Dennie. Just some feedback. Great story from you, Dennie, and definitely something I think a lot of people can relate to the things that you mentioned. But one question I have specific for you is. So you've been in tech for quite a while. We've known each other for quite a few years. We've met each other at many different occasions. A question I have is, to what extent or in what way has the situation for you changed? How is the context? Are people more considerate? Are things in tech considering more the specific situation of autism? Is that something that you see evolving, or is it a continuous battle for you to push the car ahead?
Maybe I have to answer into two parts. If
Yeah.
it's okay, and maybe so things are better, but we really are not there yet. If you look to the people with autism, or even in my situation, so things are better. But otherwise, I really had to prove myself, and I believe that really was needed. I spoke at a lot of conferences, and I really made some good inventions and stuff to talk about. I really believe that as I didn't have that, only about the autism thing, it wouldn't be there yet. And I, unfortunately, and it's the same of all diversity and minorities, how they call it. I really believe that person from specific diversity backgrounds, let's call it, really have to prove themselves really more, way more than people, let's say the white middle-aged man without a disability. Let's call it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really believe so. Maybe do you have the feeling that I answer right, or do you agree with the answer, or do you think it doesn't make sense what I'm saying?
It definitely makes sense. Yeah, being a white male person myself, of course, without a disability, indeed, is maybe a bit hard for me to answer, but I can definitely relate to that, and seeing feedback from other people as well is indeed, and the question you may ask is it your task specifically as a person with a disability to prove yourself? Is it not our task to accommodate everyone regardless of who they are and what abilities they have?
But there's even a difference between, let's call it Microsoft or conference organizers. That's already a thing, and I really have the focus that Microsoft and also most of the software organizers, conference organizers, really are doing a really good job. Maybe doing something extra, but you also, of course, have to have your knowledge and your stuff to deliver. But it's not only about the big people, or let's call it Microsoft and the organizers, but it's also about the people at the conference where you talk to, where you have discussions with. Yeah, it's not only, and it's even not only this, but also people at work, bosses, colleagues. It's not only about.
Yeah.
And I see maybe from bottom up, it's like Microsoft is really doing a really great work, honestly, and diversity and inclusion. And I don't say it because I'm a Microsoft MVP and I'm a fan. No, I'm just saying the truth. What they are doing on diversity and inclusion is really good, really terrific. But it's not because Microsoft do that. That's everyone do this in common ground, in common places, all the people at the venue. But as I said, you do what you can.
Yeah. Okay, nice. One question here I see popping up from Sergey, who is asking, Dennie, were you a self-taught programmer?
Yeah, I'm a self-taught programmer. So I started when I was the age of 16. I was in Belgium, still at a secondary school, let's call it. I don't know how you explain it. It's really good in English, but we didn't learn to program anyway. And I learned myself via books I borrowed in the library. And I even had a teacher said to me, please don't do that, play games. If you do your schoolwork, it's not a good idea to learn further. I say, I need to learn, I want to be a developer. So I was already programming when I was 16. And then when I finalized that school, when I was 19-ish, then I did some evening school for adults. I learned some modules. But of course, I did a lot of myself too.
Yeah. And then Chris, who's asking, are you using things like StyleCop or FXCop, as they used to be called, to keep your code styles in check?
No, I don't know that. If someone have a link or service to that, I didn't heard about it, honestly. If someone can provide more about that, maybe I can learn too.
I think many of those checks are already happening automatically in Visual Studio. In the full Visual Studio, I know, and there are, but it's basically indeed some automatic checkers of coding style, like linters, as you typically have them also in JavaScript. But yeah, we'll share that link with you, but definitely. Thanks a lot, Dennie. If there's no further questions, I see maybe there's other people typing. thanks a lot again for sharing your personal story and your experiences. And yeah, Chris is mentioning here, Roslonator is an interesting one as well. So we'll stay in touch definitely to share all of that
Is
information.
the host or another quiz?
Is it? It's Chris, the host.
Okay.
you know who to talk to then.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
But yeah, once again, many thanks for having you here at Virtual Azure Community Day. It was a very interesting session, and hope that many people will be looking at the recording as well.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye, Dennie, and talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
And our next session will be coming up in about 10 minutes, and then we'll have Pieter de Bruin with his session on Azure Arc and Kubernetes. So that might be an interesting one as well. So either you can stay on this track or enjoy one of the other tracks here at Virtual Azure Community Day. And see you in 10 minutes.